Wine, an alcoholic product made from the fermented remains of crushed grapes mixed with a bit of yeast, has been dated back to at least 5000 BC, prevalent in the cultures of Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Anatolia. References in mythology indicate that the Greeks commonly accepted that Dionysos carried the knowledge of winemaking from the east. It appears in Greece sometime around 3000 BC, preserved in Minoan artifacts found on the island of Crete, where it was firmly entrenched in the lives and culture of Greeks forever afterward. Some of the seafaring peoples of the Mediterranean, such as the ancient Greeks and the Phoenicians, a Semitic people found along the eastern coast of the Levant, carried the knowledge of winemaking wherever they established colonies and trading posts along the coast of the western Mediterranean. Sometime along the 8th century BC, this knowledge was spread by these traders and settlers to the Etruscans, an ancient people of the northern Italian peninsula. The Etruscans would set up the basic viniculture that would serve as the foundations of an industry built by their more famous Latin-speaking neighbors to the south, the Romans. After the expulsion of the Etruscans from Italy in the 5th century BC, and completing their conquest of the Italian peninsula in the 3rd century, the wine trade began to flourish under the economic and political unity of the Roman Republic. The regions of Etruria and Campania along the western Italian coast played host to very favorable vineyard climate and environment, and the large influx of slaves from foreign conquests also provided the much-needed workforce to aggressively maintain the vineyards. Plato's dialogue, the Symposium, is centered on a drinking party, where many of the famous and wealthy men of Athens gathered in order to discuss politics and philosophy. Socrates is championed by his compatriots for being able to drink without ever succumbing to drunkenness, and actually ends up leaving the party after his fellow compatriots have passed out in an effort to keep up with him. The party may seem like a convenient scenario to get many men of various standings and ideologies together, but it does demonstrate the role of wine that played in much of the social life of Greece and Rome. Wine was drunk across all social classes, rich and poor, civilian and soldier, adult and child, slave and freedman. Contrary to popular belief, it was still not illegal for women to drink in both Greece and Rome. However, it was heavily frowned upon due to the numerous allegations that women preferred to drink their wine straight, and would thus have loose sexual morality as a result. The god Dionysos Bacchus in the Roman pantheon was considered the patron of wine, religious ecstasy, and fertility. Wine was an important tool for reaching a different level of consciousness, a way to communicate with the afterlife, and was often a form of sacrifice or a gift towards gods via libations. Festivals such as the Roman Bacchanalia and the Greek Dionysia celebrated the god through his priestesses, called Maenads, who were immortalized in the play The Bacchae by Euripides in the late 5th century BC, by getting outrageously intoxicated and dancing wildly to a state of near madness. Many cases occurred where they have accused these women of murdering men who have passed by during one of their many chaotic festivals. Both poets and philosophers commonly espoused the benefits of drinking wine, particularly lauded the ability of the drinker to maintain composure and express moderation in their imbibing of spirits, much like our friend Socrates previously demonstrated. Those such as the great Dr. Hippocrates argued that there were numerous health benefits to drinking wine, using it as an antiseptic or to dull pains and aches. The cultivation of vineyards was considered a rustic virtue by poets such as Virgil in his Georgics. Hither haste, O father of the winepress, all things here teem with the bounties of thy hand. For thee with viny autumn laden blooms the field, and foams the vintage high with brimming vats. Hither, O father of the winepress, come, and stripped of buskins stain thy bare limbs, in the new must with me. The way wine was drunk in Greece and Rome was to typically dilute it with water, in various ratios depending upon the situation, largely due to the imperfect distillation process of the times, which resulted in rather concentrated product compared to our modern techniques. Many authors of the classical world responded to instances of the barbarian peoples drinking undiluted wine with horror, such as Greek author Diodorus Siculus, who recounts, quote, "The Gauls are exceedingly addicted to the use of wine, drinking it unmixed, and since they partake of this drink without moderation by reasoning of their craving for it, when they are drunken they fall into a stupor or a state of madness." In contrast to the virtue of modesty, drunkenness was often a character flaw heavily emphasized by many ancient historians. Philip II of Macedon was described as being a notorious drunk both on and off the battlefield. Many of Alexander the Great's more infamous deeds were allegedly done under the influence of wine, such as the burning of the Persian city Parsa, or the murder of his friend Clytus the Black. Cicero claims Mark Antony had once vomited on the floor of the Senate Forum after beginning his morning with a bout of heavy drinking. In the 2nd century BC, Roman politicians enacted harsh purges on behalf of a moral panic against the members of the cult of Bacchus, on the basis that the cult threatened the moral constitution of the peoples and caused huge damages during its celebrations, and the Senate banned it outright in 186 BC. On the more cynical note, it may have just as been likely an attempt by the Roman Senate to consolidate more power over the affairs of the Roman state. Wine was one of the many ways that Greco-Roman civilization was able to penetrate into the heart of Western Europe. The inability to practice viniculture and the unfettered drinking of undiluted wine became part of some of the definitions that the Greek and Romans would label a people as being barbarian. Wine was perhaps the Roman Empire's largest export, not only prized among the citizens and allies of her empire, but also of the barbarian peoples along the periphery. The people of Gaul, which is modern-day France, Belgium, and Switzerland, considered wine a highly prized commodity. Originally, the Gallic peoples were mainly drinkers of beer. However, evidence suggests that hundreds of thousands of amphorae, Greek-style terracotta storage jugs, usually containing between 25 to 30 gallons of wine in each, were traded to southern Gaul each year by the end of the 2nd century BC, in exchange for their famed metalworking slaves. Tacitus even alleges that the normally freedom-loving Germanic peoples would nearly gamble their lives away in order to acquire more wine. Several areas of wine production were established by the Romans across the Mediterranean, particularly the areas of modern-day France, Spain, and Portugal, were largely due to Roman demand. Though owning a vineyard was originally an exclusive Roman right, time eventually allowed for the transfer of ownership to the provincials, and thus contributed to the, quote, Romanization of the people on these lands. Scholars also point out the similarities between many of the Greco-Roman traditions of Dionysos and some of the traditions of Christianity, particularly of the use of wine in their sacraments. Although wine has a presence in earlier Jewish tradition, even being present in the book of Genesis, some scholars point out that the pagan populace's eventual acceptance of Christianity in the later empire could be partially due to a synchrony between the wine used in the sacrament and that of the rites of Bacchus. Compare that to later Islam, which had banned alcohol outright for a few centuries afterwards.